Good afternoon and welcome to Lunchtime Live on Radio Gibraltar with me, Ros Astengo. And today we're talking about antisocial behaviour. Now that's quite a broad term, but the impact on victims is pretty much the same. It's usually ongoing and can range from being a nuisance to distressing and even threatening. It can make you feel like you're living in a nightmare in your own home, leaving you feeling powerless to do anything about it. So what's being done to tackle the problem? Well, who better to ask than the Commissioner of Police, Richard Ullger, who joins me now in the studio. Good afternoon, Richard.
Good afternoon, Ross.
Richard, I've had lots of messages from members of the public over the past 24 hours since I posted on social media that we were going to be having this discussion. And I will be raising some of the comments that they have sent to me with you, see what you say about that. But first of all, it is a broad term. What is antisocial behaviour?
Well, essentially, antisocial behaviour is defined as behaviour which causes or is likely to cause harassment, alarm or distress to one or more persons. So antisocial behaviour can affect just the one individual or a number of individuals. And then if we look at it in the broader terms, it could be personal antisocial behaviour. A lot of it, what we see is nuisance antisocial behaviour, and then there's the environmental antisocial behaviour. So there's a wide variety of different antisocial behaviours which we tackle on a daily basis. But unfortunately, what antisocial behaviour has is an impact on people's lives, particularly in a place like Gibraltar, which is a small place and heavily built up, and people living on top of one another.
So we're talking about noise, loud noises. We're talking about perhaps drugs and smoking and vandalism, graffiti, that sort of thing.
Correct. So if we look at the causes of antisocial behaviour, we're looking at rowdy and inconsiderate behaviour. We're talking about the mix of drugs and alcohol having a considerable impact on antisocial behaviour. And then we've got those offences like littering and even vehicle nuisance offences. So one of the things that we're really conscious about is that people driving on our roads constantly commit nuisance offences with their vehicles. And we're constantly addressing issues of loud noise, careless driving and so forth, which have an impact on people's lives. We know it does, but we need to constantly address these.
Okay, I mean, some people might consider it to be low-level crime. You, obviously, the RGP, have a lot of very serious crime to deal with. I mean, how much of a priority is antisocial behaviour?
That's a very good question, Ross. That's a very good question, because simply we do police a lot of risk areas. And quite honestly, when we're dealing with very high-risk areas, for my force, for the people of the Royal Gibraltar Police, it's important that we address those high-risk areas. So if my police officers are dealing with a domestic incident which has violence or a serious robbery or serious burglary, we have our duty of care to the vulnerable people or vulnerable victims. And therefore, what happens to antisocial behaviour, it goes down the pecking order. So we've got a system called Thrive, and it's called threats, harm, risks, investigation, vulnerability. And what we do is, when we get a call coming into our control room, we will thrive a incident, and then we will risk and analyze it, and it goes into a pecking order. So, for example, if I take last night our officers were involved in investigating two major traffic accidents that happened more or less at the same time, and we were dealing with a domestic incident. All of the police officers on duty that night were fully committed for a good part of anything between 2 and 4 hours. So that means that people who are complaining about maybe antisocial behaviour are not getting the response from our people. And that is an area that people need to understand. And it's something that I've constantly spoken about and want to address in Gibraltar, that people need to understand that we're policing other high-risk areas.
But given the fact that antisocial behaviour is usually ongoing, it's usually persistent, and quite often it's with the same people, it's very frustrating if, for example, people are phoning the RGP on a regular basis to get something done about it, and finding that there hasn't always been a response. So in terms of responding to antisocial behaviour, you may not have been able to respond to it, for example, last night. But, do you have a system in place whereby you do ensure that all these calls are dealt with at some point?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, no call goes unanswered here in the Royal Gibraltar Police, and we strive to ensure that we deal with absolutely everything that's reported to us, because victims of crime are important to us. If I look at the holistic way we address this, we've got a strategy, and that strategy has a number of partners. You've got the Ministry of Environment, we have the Ministry of Education, we have the Ministry of the Housing, a number of key partners. And obviously, everyone plays an important part in education, awareness, and as a last resort is enforcement. Because enforcement, we want to make sure that people don't become criminalized because of antisocial behavior. But there are times when we have to. So if we look at antisocial behavior linked to criminal damage, that is completely unacceptable and we won't tolerate it. And people will have to face the criminal justice system for that. But what we need to do is understand, educate, make people aware of it. And we're not only talking about young people here. We're talking about people in their mid-20s, 30s, and even now 40s causing antisocial behavior. And we've noticed an increase, particularly during this COVID-19 period that we're facing, which has been unprecedented for us.
Well, let's just get some statistics to see how big a problem this is. What can you tell us about how many complaints about antisocial behaviour you get, and particularly in this COVID period? What can you tell us?
Well, as an organisation, we've done something new, and it came as a result of HMIC recommendations and about reporting crime. One of the things that we weren't capturing was capturing noise as offences and offences of antisocial behaviour linked to noise. And what we found this year is that for sure our crime statistics will go up, certainly because we've included noise. So if I look at how many complaints we've had to deal with in the month of November, we've had to deal with 96 complaints of antisocial behaviour, of which 62 of those were noise offences. So these are your typical offences where people are having house parties at home or people congregating outside other people's houses and making just too much noise. And the average is usually anything between 35 and 40. So you can see that double increase. And that's happened over the past few months. And we're noticing that the increase could be attributed because of COVID-19. More people staying at home because it's one of the things that Her Majesty's Government of Gibraltar, the Minister of Sacramento is asking our people to stay at home, not to mingle with others. But obviously they're getting together in small little groups, having their house parties, but being indiscriminate to other neighbours.
Okay, well, let me just ask you before we go into very specific complaints people have made and sent me messages about. How does the police deal with an instance of antisocial behaviour now? And it could be neighbours being very rowdy and noisy, or it could be kids, hanging around in an estate. How does the police deal with it? And if it's effective, why is it quite often recurring?
It's all about behaviour. It's all about people. It's all about maybe an entitlement to be able to have a party and enjoy themselves. One of the things that we don't want to do, and I've mentioned it already, is we don't want to criminalise people, particularly young people who are going, we've all been young and we all want to have a good time. What's wrong is sometimes individuals don't realise that they're causing a nuisance to other people. And again, I go back to the fact that Gibraltar is a crowded area and we're all living on top of one another. So what we try to do is educate young people. We've done some very good work with our school liaison officers and the education department with young people talking about nuisance offences, antisocial behaviour, and talking to people. What we need to do is expand that further, make it a subject of interest for Gibraltar PLC, and include parents, because parents have a very important duty to play. Now, I'm talking about young people, but it's also important that we also capture people who are in their 20s and 30s and 40s having a good time as well, so that they're aware of it, because everyone has a duty to play here.
What about Asbos? I mean, when will you give out an Asbo? Was that quite extreme?
No, not at all. So we're really grateful for the fact that we had, in 2011, the Crimes Act replaced and modernised existing legislation and introduced antisocial behaviour orders, which can be imposed without a conviction. And it also imposed the criminal antisocial behaviour orders, which are known as the Asbos, which can be imposed by the courts as a consequence of a conviction. Now, there have been some teething problems in that regard, and it's all to do with evidence and how we capture the evidence, but it's something that we want to take on board. But I must stress that our antisocial behaviour is nowhere near to what my colleagues in the UK and other nations are facing, because when we talk about antisocial behaviour linked to knife crime, gun crime, we don't face those problems. We're so fortunate that our crimes are linked to noise, maybe a bit of drunkenness, rowdiness, and obviously criminal damage, which is very important, and we need to be addressing that. But and so going back to your question about Asbos and Asbos, Asbos are a very effective tool. We've only used them on one occasion, But we're pretty content that we don't have to apply it for Asbos or Asbos because we're finding that it's not a recurring problem with a certain individual.
You've only used an Asbo on one occasion?
That's correct. And simply because...
Since 2011? Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So if you look at Asbos and Crasbos were introduced in the UK to deal with really problematic young people. We're really fortunate to have a good system in place where we've got the youth service, we've got the police, we've got the education department who managed to get in very, very quickly to address these issues. And when we talk about Asbos and Crasbos, we're talking about individuals. We managed to pull the individuals away from getting served an Asbo or a Crasbo. But more work needs to be done in respect of how we gather evidence for Asbos because there were teething problems in that regard.
Okay, well, that all sounds really good, but I have had a lot of feedback from people talking about problems that they're experiencing and that they don't feel that is necessarily being dealt with. One of the estates that I got the most complaints about, and I've only just put this on social media for the last 24 hours, so I'm sure that there are a lot of people might wanted to have contacted me and haven't done so yet, but so far Varyl Begg Estate has had a lot now, and of course both comprehensives are in that area, and it seems to be an area for those students and kids to congregate within Varyl Begg Estate. It's causing a lot of disturbance to the neighbours there, and apparently there are a lot of kids there that also hang around after the kids have gone back to school, and they're pretty much there all day, all night, making noise, loud music, smoking. What's being done about Varyl Begg Estate? Has that been particularly flagged up particularly since the comprehensives went there?
Oh, absolutely, but not only linked to the comprehensive schools. So what we've done as an organisation is we're making antisocial behaviour a serious thing for us. And what we've created is a team of officers known as Trojan. You may have heard of the mere fact that we've come out publicly talking about Trojan before in the past. And what these officers are doing together in coordination with our school liaison officers who work very closely with the education department is tackling issues of antisocial behaviour. We have had joint patrols between Trojan officers and school liaison officers constantly in the areas of Varyl Begg, Lagoon Estate and other estates.
Is that a daily thing? You say constant. Is that daily?
So it forms part of our daily tasking group meetings. So we recognise there are issues in Varyl Begg Estate. But I go back to my Thrive, what we talked about earlier before. If we are dealing with a number of incidents which are pretty high up on our risk matrix, our officers might be redeployed to deal with something else simply because that is more important to us. What I don't want to do is people, when they report crime to them, it's heaven and earth for them. It's the world to them. And we understand that because it's really important to them. But people need to understand that we've got other risk areas. But what we are trying to do is deploy our officers into problem areas to make sure that we address them. But more often than not, what we do find is that we address them and have a policing footprint in the area for a particular period of time. And we might curb it for a while. Then what we find is that it'll go and it will be displaced somewhere else. So that means that it's very much like a cat and mouse type of thing where we need to be chasing them constantly. But one of the things that we are concerned, and I've said it already, is the causing damage. And we know that there's been a number of causing damages, particularly in areas of Varyl Begg. And only last week, my superintendent of operations met with the housing minister to see how we could tackle the causing damage. So if we look at tools that we have in place, CCTV is an excellent tool to police.
Is that present in Varyl Begg Estate?
So yes. So we've got CCTV in different estates, and what we're doing is in working in partnership with the housing department is to ensure that they report to us any events of causing damage, that they view CCTV, provide us the evidence, and we would deal with the criminal act, working in partnership with them.
I think it's very important to say at this point that a lot of children, just because they are gathering together and talking and laughing loudly doesn't necessarily mean that they are behaving in an antisocial way. They might be disturbing a neighbour, but kids have got to go somewhere as well.
Yeah, correct. And like I said, we've all been children. We we're living in a built-up area. But what people need to understand is that there are neighbours, there are people that go to bed early. By 10, 11, 12 o'clock, people are in bed, and you are disturbing their sleep, or even during the daytime where it's lunchtime, like you said before, where kids are going into Varyl Begg during school times.
I do have quite a few others, if I can just go through them, if we can go through them quite quickly. Peter Isola Promenade, the Small Boats Marina area, lots of complaints about dangerous driving, youth doing wheelies, all sorts of threatening behaviour really going on there. What's been done about that particular area?
So Peter Isola Promenade is an area of concern for us. It's been highlighted in a number of daily tasking group meetings, and we are enforcing the law in that area, and we are proactively dealing with this. Only this morning I met with Minister Dayarani, the Transport Minister, to look at how we could implement measures to prevent the antisocial behaviour. I won't talk about what the measures are, but certainly we're proactively looking at it, because we're not only getting complaints from the neighbours that live in mid-harbours, but we're also getting complaints from those high-end yachts that are coming in, berthing in, living, contributing to our economy, but at the same time facing these young people trying to have fun in an antisocial behaviour way.
Could we expect some measures in that area soon?
We're certainly looking at it, and like I said, Minister Dayarani met me this morning. We looked at a number of measures, and we're looking at working in partnership with a number of people in that regard.
Okay, the other issue many people complained about was loud exhausts, backfiring, very loud driving, particularly at night, I think, as well, with loud music. What's been done about that? These custom exhausts are a nightmare. They are
a nightmare, and we do police it. And our officers constantly report for process individuals that violate our laws in respect of ineffective exhausts. The issue that we find here is that you have retailers selling these exhausts, and then the riders adapting those exhausts so that they become louder. Like I said, we proactively police it, but at times we can only do so much. And it's all about partnership. It's all about awareness. It's all about education. And people need to realise, if they've got a loud exhaust, they're going to be disturbing the peace, particularly at night time or even during the daytime.
So if someone goes by making a huge noise and I get their registration plate and I call you up and I say, look, this person's driving around making lots of noise, would you then follow that up?
Certainly. So that would be investigated by our people. But I go back to what I said earlier about our Thrive. Police officers will it would be passed on to our traffic department. They will investigate it and if they can search for that vehicle, and they will address it.
Very quickly, fireworks going off. Illegal fireworks or in public areas. Moorish Castle, I think, was an area that was reported very recently. What are you doing about that?
Again, fireworks is of concern to us. It is, and it's something that we've met with the Minister of Environment together with the Customs and the Chief Fire Officer of the Gibraltar Fire and Rescue Services. We need to look at it holistically, because it's not only the responsibility of the police. If you look at the law in respect of fireworks, the only offence that you commit is the minute you set it off. So you can possess the fireworks, but you commit an offence when you set it off in a public place.
By which time it's too late.
We
do need to go. If I can ask you for a very quick 15-second comment about, tackling antisocial behaviour, generally speaking. Do you have it in hand, basically?
I wouldn't say, and I go back to what I said about my colleagues in the UK, gangs, guns, knives. We don't have those problems. But we do have a problem with noise. We need to address it. And this is a problem that we need to deal with together in partnership with other agencies.
Okay, thank you very much. The Commissioner of Police, Richard Ullger, coming in today speaking about antisocial behaviour. Stay with us for Radio Gibraltar Plus in Spanish on 100.5 FM and 1458 medium wave, while here on 91.3 and 92.6 FM, Ben Lynch will be keeping you company throughout the afternoon. It's just coming up to 2.